Also, as a heads up, the chat isn't visible to participants.
I need to post these links. I'll be back in a minute.
Yes, we are live.
Okay, the links are posted. So
I'll start the recording in a few minutes when the event starts. Actually, Kela, just since you're leading, just tell me when you want to start the recording, and I'll do that. If you have just joined the live stream, the event will be starting soon. Just giving everybody time to join.
Okay, welcome everyone to our second live event at OrbitCamp, and today or this afternoon, wherever you are, we have a career panel right now with an amazing group of people here to talk about their careers and astrodynamics and where they've come from and where they've been. And so we have a group of 6 amazing women with us today, and I'm going to do a brief short bio of all of our panelists before I pass it off to Datri, who will be asking the questions. If you are joining us today, you can also feel free to post some questions in the chat box on YouTube, and we will ask those if we have time later on during the presentation. So our first panelist today is Amanda Hoppola, who received her PhD from Purdue University and now works at Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab within the space sector under the Astrodynamics and Controls Group. At APL, Amanda focuses on moon tour design as well as 3-body designs in cislunar space and beyond. We also have Heather Kohler on the call, and she is the Flight Mechanics Technical Fellow for NASA. She received her bachelor's and master's degree from Auburn University and has worked on a variety of projects within NASA, including space shuttle guidance, navigation and control software development, as well as project management for the Mars Ascent vehicle. Sonia Hernandez is a specialist in mission design and navigation, currently working for Continuum Space Systems, a startup that is building a cloud platform for end-to-end space as a service from ideation to design to mission operations and data analytics. She earned her PhD in aerospace engineering at the University of Texas at Austin. And prior to working at Continuum Space Systems, she was at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Bonnie Prado-Pino serves as the astrodynamics engineer for Leo Labs in Menlo Park, California, where she develops algorithms for uncertainty analysis to better track and monitor satellites in low Earth orbit. She has degrees from the Pontificia Universidad Habanera in Bogota, Colombia. Hopefully I didn't totally destroy that. And the University of Texas at Austin and Purdue University. Bonnie is also the co-founder of the Afro-Latina Experience Organization, a nonprofit initiative that exposes underrepresented students from disadvantaged regions in Latin America to STEM fields. We have with us Emily Spring, who is an aerospace engineer at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Flight Mechanics and Trajectory Design branch. She received her master's and PhDs from Purdue University and currently works on Artemis trajectory design, including applications for the Gateway program. And then finally, we have Kanak Parmar, who is a PhD student at Auburn University with a research focus on astrodynamics and the application of machine learning to real-time spacecraft path planning solutions. She's currently an intern at Advanced Space, where she is contributing to various projects related to trajectory design and validation. And so now I'm going to pass it off to Datri, who is going to start off asking some questions to the panel.
Thank you, Dr. Martin, and thank you, the panelists, for joining us today. So I want to start off by asking the most basic question we all have, which is what inspired you to pursue the field of aerospace and astrodynamics in particular?
I can maybe take that one first. So my own path has been a very wiggly one, and I often was kind of insecure about that because I didn't know when I was 6 that I wanted to do what I'm doing now, and a lot of people I felt like that I met along the way did know that. I sort of knew from an early age that I really enjoyed math. I really loved like art and design, and so just sort of carried those things forward until I figured out what to do with them, and ended up pursuing a bachelor's in physics, and quickly realized I was not cut out to be a scientist. It just was not intuitive to me, and I was in awe of my advisor when I was an undergrad, that she could think the way that she thought, but it just didn't work for me. So I sort of panicked and started thinking about changing fields completely, and then kind of stumbled across aerospace. And when I started reaching out to universities and learning more about what the programs they had and what they did, started to visit them, and sort of when I was doing those visits, just had this intuitive feeling of like, yes, no. And there was one professor at Purdue University who I just fell in love with what she was doing and the students that she had and what they were doing. it just sort of clicked, but I was, in my early 20s by that time. So I'm sort of a wiggly path example.
I can follow that. I apologize for my voice. I'm down with COVID. Anyhow, things happen. Thank you, Datre, for the question. Thank you, Kayla, for the introduction, and everybody who's watching us today. I think my path goes back to when I was very young. I'm from a very rural place in Colombia, South America, and both of my parents are university professors, but my mother, especially, she's a scientist, she's a biologist. And I remember her traveling all over the world to present at conferences, being paid for. And I remember thinking, oh, I want to do that. I want people to pay me to travel and hear me talk. And so I decided I wanted to be a scientist, but I didn't really know what kind of scientist I wanted to be. I just wanted to be paid for traveling. And then I started watching a lot of movies, and I fell in love with the Apollo 13 movie. And I remember that important moment, Houston, we've got a problem part. And I remember telling my parents, hey, I want to be that. And my parents were like, oh, you want to be an astronaut? And I said, oh, no. I don't want to be stranded in space. I want to be the person who helps him come back. And so they're like, oh, okay, cool. So then I started, into my passion for space. And I was just like, oh, I want to work for NASA. But to me, what did it was pretty much Hollywood and the movies and looking at all these really smart people doing great things. And me thinking, I want to be that person that they call to solve problems. And so fast forward, I found myself at Purdue with the same advisor as Amanda and some of you here. And it was just great. So I'm thankful for the opportunity and for the fact that I was able to pursue that initial passion that I discovered from just watching a simple movie. Well, not a simple movie, but a movie.
I think it's incredible that Hollywood has shaped so many of us. I had I watched Apollo 13 and I was hooked, but I wanted to be an astronaut at the time. This is when I was 10 years old. And then, I grew up and I kind of realized I definitely did not want to be an astronaut. And being an engineer was really the right way to go. So it's just incredible that Apollo 13 has been, I think, in a lot of our minds and shaping. And, to me, I knew I wanted to do space for a really long time, but it never seemed like a straight path, right? There's always ups and downs and you feeling like, what am I doing? I have no idea. And, somehow it all works out.
If I could maybe tag on to that, since we're talking Hollywood, I'm going to go a little further back, being a child of the 80s. My main motivation was the movie Space Camp. With Leah Thompson, 1986, Joaquin Phoenix, Kate Capshaw. I'm not joking. I saw that movie and I asked my parents if I could go to space camp because I wanted the exact same experience as was in the movie. And that's kind of what started me on my journey. And after I went to space camp and Space Academy, I wanted to study aerospace engineering. I looked up all the universities where most of the astronauts graduated from, and Purdue was on that list, and Notre Dame, and Air Force Academy in Auburn. And so I found my way down to Auburn and stuck with that degree program the whole time, knowing that I wanted to work for NASA. And like many of you guys have just heard, right, you either want to be an astronaut or you want to do something associated with space. So starting in aerospace engineering obviously fed all of those needs, but it was driven by Hollywood 1986.
Kanak, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so my dad and my grandpa are actually civil engineers, and the rest of my family is medical professionals. So me going into aerospace was kind of out of left field for everyone. But they were never against it. They fully supported it. And I think what really got me into aerospace and the space exploration sector in particular is when I was maybe 3 or 4. I went to a planetarium show and we saw just it was like a simulated journey of the Voyager spacecraft. And I remember seeing that and I thought, that's really cool. I want to work on something like that at some point. So that's kind of what I decided. And I've just been trying to build towards that goal ever since. So it wasn't a straight path. It was very twist and turny, but hopefully I'm getting to that point.
Thank you. That's exciting. Dr. Spring?
Sure. So I guess, so growing up, I always, like many of the other women on this panel, it sounds like, loved math and science. I found that enjoyable. When I was a kid, I would catch lizards and measure them, things like that. So I was always interested in that kind of, scientific thinking. But what kind of drove me to, aerospace, the field of aerospace in general is I was lucky enough to grow up in South Carolina, and that is within driving distance of Kennedy Space Center. So it was, late at night one day, and my dad said, "Hey, do you want to go see a shuttle launch tomorrow?" And so we hopped in the car, drove to Florida overnight. I saw, human beings launched to space, and like tears streaming down my face. I was like, this is what I want. I want to do whatever that is. I want to be involved in that. So it was really the kind of this pivotal moment where, this scientific and this love of math and science had a goal, a focus. And then, I said, okay, well, I want to do, space stuff, and aerospace engineering was kind of like, well, I guess that's how you get to do that. I wanted to work at NASA, and, I pursued my way to that goal.
Yeah, that's inspiring. Thank you. So my next question to the panel is, what is the most memorable experience you had in the field so far? Do you want to start us off, Dr. Spring?
Sure. Let's see. So most memorable experience, I think, oh man, there's been so many really, really amazing things that I've gotten to do. As far as, career-wise, I just took a lead role on a software program, and like that's really cool to be, moving up and having people look up to me in terms of, a responsibility like that. But in terms of, kind of like an inspiring moment, I got to see James Webb Space Telescope in the vacuum chamber. So, I mean, I was, outside, I wasn't in the bunny suit or anything like that, but, seeing this incredible feat of engineering, sitting in a vacuum chamber being tested, that was pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's really incredible. I wish I had done that.
It was really cool.
Yeah.
I can go next. I think for me, so I started my career at JPL being a Cassini navigator. I was particularly doing what we call maneuver design, so making sure that the spacecraft stays on the right course. And maybe for all the young people, Cassini orbited Saturn for many, many years. It did amazing science. I mean, I think one of the coolest missions ever to have existed. And the mission ended in 2017 because the spacecraft was basically out of fuel, and without fuel, then you can't control your spacecraft, and then you don't know where it's going to crash. But it was just, I think it was an amazing experience being, like the last few days of this actual mission, being there as a navigator, being able to design the last maneuvers that ever went up on that spacecraft. And I will have to say, if any of you ever do get into operations, it can, at least for me, I'll say this, seemed like it can be a mundane task at times, but when you think of the global picture that you were actually navigating a spacecraft so far away, I just find that incredible. So that's been the highlight for me.
Thank you. I know for me, when I was doing my master's, the Cassini trajectory was one of my inspirations too. do the astrodynamics related thesis topic. So thank you. That's highly incredible.
I can continue. I think for me was so I'm working now in this company that builds radars, space radars, and so we have radars all over the place. And coming from an astro background, where everything we did, well, everything I did in school was theoretical, right? So like designing orbits, designing trajectories and stuff like that. And it's almost like it's hard for you to see that orbit, or that trajectory being flown, if not impossible. I'm not going to say impossible, but it's really hard for you to fly a trajectory, especially if you're doing it as a grad student. So coming into this other side of things is like, we're actually building radars from scratch. Like there is people like sitting around me in my company who are literally, building the components and putting all these like motherboards together to like have something point out, an antenna point out, and see the spacecraft comes, right? So like it all sounds really cool, and we're all engineers, so we sort of understand it. But the company took an engineering trip to like, oh, let's actually, some of you work with radars, work with collision avoidance algorithms, but you haven't seen a radar before, so we'll take you so that you can see the radar. So they took us down to Costa Rica, which was amazing, by the way. They started paying me to travel. Amazing. Anyways, they took us down to Costa Rica to see this radar. And number one, these things are gigantic, okay, like huge. And then it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm as an astro person building or like doing the orbit determination for these satellites that are flying over us, and this big old radar is like catching it, but like seeing it's just a piece of metal, and to me it was mind-blowing. It was like this gigantic piece of metal from which we are actually constructing orbits from, and it was just like eye-opening. It all came together, like electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, aerospace, all kinds of different engineerings come together for one little radar so that we can actually say, hey, these two satellites are going to collide in 2 days. I don't know, to me, it was mind-blowing to see it from like the very raw metal structure to like completion, to which what I'm working on, the algorithms that I'm working on. So that day I realized, oh, wow, this is real work, and like it actually makes sense, everything I'm doing. I think that was the most memorable experience I've had, is just seeing these things. It's kind of like what Emily was saying about seeing James Webb, right? Like you see the actual structure, you're like, oh, this is what's doing what I'm, programming in my computer. It's really mind-blowing, and it makes you humble as well. It's like, I'm just one piece of the puzzle, and all I can do is continue to contribute to the best of my knowledge, and always understanding that it's not just me, it's a community. It takes a community for us to get, the advances in space that we want to continue to get. So I think that was it.
That's amazing.
I think I can add a few notes onto the other women's stories. My experiences maybe go back a little bit further, but I've had the opportunity. I've been really blessed and fortunate to work on a lot of manned programs, and some of my earliest memories. And I won't say it's my best. I've had so many great ones, so it's really hard to pick one more so than the others. But something that was certainly very impressionable on me was my very first job, right out of Auburn, University. I was working on the space shuttle primary flight software, GNC, and I got to work in the mission support room, the mission evaluation room. So it's the back room. All the flight controllers are in the front room. That's what you see on TV. But there's a back room of engineers that actually solve the real-time problems in flight, the anomalies. And so I was working on the software, and leading up to this one particular flight, I had implemented a particular software change, and this mission was STS-93. So this was the very first mission for Eileen Collins, first female shuttle commander. And days before she launched, she sent me a personal email thanking me for the hard work that I had done on this particular software change. And I had gone with them over into the shuttle avionics lab and helped them test that software. And she was highly involved. And so getting a personal recognition email from Miss Eileen Collins was huge. I actually printed out the email. I saved it for my children. But there were just a lot of firsts like that, being the discipline lead over all of the kind of flight mechanics, or we call it vehicle management functions for Space Launch System. It's sitting on the pad right now, about to go through wet dress rehearsal. I did that for a number of years, led, responsible for the trajectory, mission design, the GM&C and environments, and in a technical leadership role. And knowing that it's sitting on the pad, I'm anxious to get down there and hope to see that thing launch. Designing and assessing trajectories and potential collisions for spacecraft like space station and meteor showers, right? That was another job that I had that was kind of different from what I'm doing now, but just looking at meteoroids and the risk they pose to spacecraft, and helping spacecraft designers build better shielding for that spacecraft. And so just kind of having my fingerprints on a lot of different programs and projects, I feel like I've actually contributed something, so that when I die, I just didn't push paper from one side of my desk to the other, but I actually had a physical impact, right? Either in human exploration or science collection, because, my work contributed to safer spacecraft. So, all of those combined, it's really hard to pick out just one. But it's been the best career I've ever had, and I'm never bored, never bored.
That's very exciting. I'm very amazing. So you all have been part of such great programs, and we would like to know how you pursue your ambitions at workplace, where you work. What advice do you have for successful pursuit for somebody starting just now? Dr. Heather, do you want to go answer that?
Yeah, actually, I've thought a lot about this. I do a lot of mentoring, and we're kind of expected to, right, as senior leaders, probably as most of the other women are too in their fields. You're expected to mentor a lot. And some of the advice that I often give people is, if you want to enter this field and you want to advance your career, chase the experience, not the promotion, right? I know oftentimes, right, people are kind of equate, your pay grade or your salary with how important you are. But if you want to be recognized and make your mark, then chase the experience. Look for opportunities, be proactive in seeking out things that are interesting to you, and ask people that are doing that, hey, tell me about your job. How did you get into this? Who do you need to know? What skills do you need to have? And the more vocal and outspoken and proactive you are, those opportunities are going to come to you. Don't make the mistake of sitting back waiting for your supervisor to give you an assignment. Go and talk to them and say, hey, I'd really like to get involved in this project, or I think I can do this. Can I take this training course to get better skills for programming, or what have you? It's going to be hard when you're one of the fewer females or minority in the room, and that's often the case in this field. Don't be quiet. Speak out, ask questions, and don't be afraid of asking a stupid question. Chances are most people in the field are going to have or in the room are going to have the same question. They're just too shy to say something. So just, take up space, be big, let your voice be heard, and be proactive, seeking out things that are interesting to you.
Thank you.
So I just want to say, like, that experience and that advice is exactly, that's words that I live by. I recently got this new role, and the way I got it was essentially, I asked my boss, I said, hey, how do I get to be on the Artemis recovery ship? And he said, well, actually, and so, now I'm leading that whole team. And so really just asking if you're interested is very, very good advice. I mean, the worst that can happen is, you're in the same boat you're already in and you're not doing that job, right? So the only thing that can happen is good things by, asking your supervisor, talking to people about jobs that you're interested in and how did you get to do this job and how do I get to be involved and things like that. One other thing that I'd like to add on is, always saying yes to opportunities, even if they don't necessarily seem like they will be directly on, this imagined path you have for yourself. Going to a conference with people that you don't necessarily know about a topic that maybe you don't think that you would be interested in, that might open the door to a connection that leads you somewhere fantastic later on in your career. So I think, saying yes to opportunities is a good piece of advice that has brought me far, I'd say.
Thank you. Any takers next?
Something else that I'll add on, I don't know if it's necessarily advice, but something that if you will find out if you stick in this community is that it's a pretty small community, the one of astrodynamics. And in fact, I mean, just on this panel, I know Emily and Amanda for many years, and Bonnie is a very, very dear friend of mine. So the people that you meet, even if you're in school now, they will stick around forever, and you'll, believe it or not, end up building missions with them, collaborating with them. So it's just, I think it's just an incredible community.
Dr. Habla, or do you have any advice for us?
Yeah, I think I sort of would echo what a lot of what we have already heard. So a lot of, I think what I've kind of arrived at after years of experimenting with like what's the right way to navigate life is to kind of figure out what your values are and what it is that you love, and really follow that thing as much as you can. And like Heather was saying, if you're looking at things as like a stepping stone or something, I think the path can feel less rewarding along the way. And if you're instead kind of pursuing things because there's something that you think you love about it or you're passionate about, I think that's what I've found the most rewarding, and that's where I've kind of found my place. That's been my best sort of where I end up in the best situations. And to that end, I've sort of learned along the way that women tend to see opportunities and then overthink whether or not they're qualified for those, and tend to be less apt to apply for things or ask questions like Emily was saying, because they kind of worry that they're not where they need to be in order to pursue it. And I'd say don't overthink things. If something seems interesting, even if you're not checking every box that you think you need to do it, still reach out. And like Emily said, the worst that can happen is that maybe you are not quite ready for that opportunity and you don't get it, but maybe you do. And maybe it's something that, you really end up loving and takes you other places. So yeah, that's sort of my 2 cents.
Thank you. Building upon that a little bit, I know oftentimes, especially women find themselves being the only women in the room, especially when it comes to engineering places, like whether it be a team that you're working on or a classroom that you're in. What advice do you have for new engineers navigating this kind of an environment?
I can speak on that for a little. Oh, sorry, Heather. I was gonna say that is true. Most of the time, we will find ourselves being the only one in a particular project or in a particular setup. However, we are lucky to be in a very scientific-driven setup, in the sense that if you are knowledgeable enough and if you have the right, qualifications and the right aptitudes and attitude, you do not have to worry about being that one single person, because your knowledge is going to speak for you. And so sometimes we walk into a room, and I am talking this from my own experience as being a woman, a Black person, and a Latina person. So like when I walk in, my accent comes out. If I'm nervous, I start sweating, I forget my English. And it all used to happen because I would second guess myself. And so my trick to this is forget about it. You're just one more person in the room. Because if you start noticing stuff about you, then other people is going to notice as well. So my trick to that is forget that you're a woman at that moment. Forget that you're a minority at that moment. Forget that you might have an accent. Just speak what you have to say, because you have been trained for that. And it's always realizing and understanding that we're not in places because we're some sort of token. We are in places because we deserve to be there, because we work hard to be there. And that is something that only we can convince ourselves about. We cannot walk into a room and expect somebody to say, oh, I know you're the only woman, so, don't worry, this is a safe space, you'll find, you can say something. No, that's on you. You have to walk into a room and you have to have that talk to yourself before you walk into a room. This is a safe space. I know what I know. I've done my job. I am trained for this. I'm going to walk in with confidence and I'm going to do what I need to do. And that way, when you show confidence, that's the best way to navigate and break those barriers, because people can always tell if you're nervous. People can always tell if you're like doubting something. And then again, if you're speaking with facts and the facts are right, people can fact check you and they will know that you're saying the truth. So there will be no reason why people will come at you just because you're a woman if you are, saying the right things in the right way, of course, and with enough confidence. So anyways, I think that was too much. My summary: be confident and believe in yourself. You are trained for this. You work hard for this. You deserve to be where you are. Don't let anybody let you down. Don't let anybody talk you down, because this is something that nobody's giving you. You work for it. And I think that's what you have to have in mind when you work in a setup, when you are the only one. And trust me, I've done it multiple times and you get used to it. And at some point you even forget, oh, was I the only woman? I didn't even notice. It just goes over your head once you start going over and over again, I think.
Thank you.
I love Bonnie's advice. I think you're 100% right. And yeah, and you start forgetting. And something interesting that happened to me, I recently changed jobs we're a small startup, and we're like 8 people in the company, but 4 of us are women. And so when I'm in meetings, and the first time I logged on and we were more women than men, that actually stood out to me. And so I really hope for the time when it doesn't matter how many men or how many women are in the room, it's not going to surprise me. It's just we're doing our jobs and we're all as technically knowledgeable and able and capable.
Thank you.
Just adding on top of what's been echoed, one thing that I really learned on how to tackle this sort of issue, I guess, is it's also important to surround yourself with the right people that make sure you don't get into that mindset of, are they judging me just because I'm a woman? Because I would rather be judged on the strength of my technical analysis and my skill set, and not just the fact that I'm a woman or a minority. So I think that's also somewhat of a factor in how well I perform sometimes. So
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you.
Might add on to what some of the other women were mentioning, but very specific actionable steps that you can take. Don't be afraid to walk into the room and sit at the table, right? Sometimes conference rooms have got a big table in the middle and then they've got a bunch of chairs around the back. And, I've seen women, including myself, I'll walk in, and if I don't really understand the atmosphere or, necessarily what's going on or who the players are in a particular meeting, I've been known to just sit in the back of the room. No. you know, depending on your role, right? If you're presenting or if you're a stakeholder, or if you have something to contribute to that project or whatever the focus of the meeting is, sit at the table, go right up to it, sit down at the table and take up space. You know, sometimes I've seen a lot of women, they get cold and they'll kind of do this. They hold onto their arms and they kind of look mousy, right? And they kind of they look small, right? But if you're in a room full of men or older men or senior men, very experienced, make yourself big, take up space at the table, put your arms out, get your elbows up, get right up to the table so that when you're ready to speak, they see you, right? You're not slouching down here because I'm cold and I'm holding my arms, right? Put your stuff down, take up space. Don't let these big men come in and crowd you out, right? You're going to have something to say, speak with confidence. I think it was Bonnie that said that. I believe that everyone is going to have experience enough to contribute something useful to the conversation. So you've got to believe it. And sometimes that confidence comes with a little bit of age and experience and maturity. But actionable steps, right? Be big, sit at the table, take up space.
Wow. It's a very good advice. Thank you. So when you don't know, so we all heard about things that we do know about, like, but how do you confront a problem that no one has ever seen before? Like, what is the best way to approach it? Like, if you're dealing with something that nobody has seen, and you're tasked to, or you want to deal with it, what is the best way to approach it? This is a question from one of our audience.
So I feel like I'm on a project like this right now, and it's one that I sought out. We had a concept study that we were doing, and we had a very short time to do it. And we had to sort of put together as best of an answer as we could at the time. And then there was this, pause afterward where I was like, that deserves so much more time. And so a few of us pursued an internal research grant to try to work on it. And it's exactly that thing. It's the committee, when we were proposing the idea and trying to get funding for it, they asked, how is this done currently? And our answer is no, nobody's doing this. And I think the most important thing to that is it's just being a curious, having a curiosity about it and coming in with the understanding that you're going to have to learn new areas. You're going to have to reach out to people in different areas to try to understand, how have similar things been done before. And sometimes it's putting those things together and trying to assemble sort of all these parts that people have studied in the past to try to figure out, at least small steps forward. And I think it's appropriate in that kind of a situation to say, this is going to be really hard. It's going to take a lot of creative thinking and like thinking that, ideas that I don't even know people have thought about before, and reaching out and figuring out those things. So it's a lot of fun. It's something that you're passionate about. And that's my.
Thank you.
I'll continue on just super briefly with what Amanda was saying. I think it's trying to get more comfortable with maybe being a little uncomfortable. So maybe you don't necessarily know every single step along the way. You don't have the recipe to get to the exact answer at the end of the day. It's not, first I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to have my answer. It's, sometimes you don't know, at all where to start. Maybe just take one step and see where that step leads you. And then from there, maybe you can take another baby step, and maybe that was the wrong direction. And so you backtrack and you take another one. And, that's kind of, it's okay to not know exactly how you're going to approach a problem. It's okay to not know at the beginning. It just takes time to figure out, the path along the way.
Thank you. Now moving on to questions from the audience. So from Rahman, this question is about the co-founders and the CEOs of new aerospace companies. He thinks that they are not very diverse. How can we increase the diversity? How can we increase the combination of diversity and experience in the management in aerospace companies, I guess? Heather, maybe you want to take this one?
Yeah, I'll try. So, kind of following back onto my previous comment, I think it is helpful, right, if we can encourage our folks, our young folks, to get as much variety of experience as possible, so that you are ready to compete for those positions, when they become available. You are more marketable and valuable to a company or an organization if you have a broad range of different experiences. You don't want to, I think one of the panel members said something, right? You don't want to get yourself into the mode of thinking, well, I'm just here because I'm a token, person, whatever, checking a box. You need to have that experience so that you can lead that team and put yourself in that best position. So, I'm really passionate about mentoring others, and I really feel strongly, right, that if we want to see diversity in our leadership, we've got to encourage that next generation underneath us, and we've got to give them opportunities and encourage them to take proactive steps to find those opportunities to gain that experience. And then not be afraid to put yourself out there for, competing for that position. You may not have the credentials right then and there today, but the act of interviewing, the act of applying for the job, gets your name out there in that organization and says, hey, maybe the next one, that person's going to be ready for it. So I think it's a combination of seeking out your own diverse experiences, but then talking to your friends and your coworkers, right? Encouraging them and making sure that they're in the best opportunity. If you are in a leadership position and you have any influence over your staff or your personnel, seek out those people that aren't always vocal or outspoken, or you think they have something to contribute. You got to encourage them to seek out those opportunities so that they're ready to be competitive for those leadership positions. But it has to be deliberate and it has to be intentional, right? To focus on those underrepresented folks, to give them those opportunities and experiences, because that's really what's going to help solve the toughest problems is having people with the broadest range of experiences and perspectives that can contribute.
Thank you.
If I can piggyback on that answer, I think it was great. And I would add that one thing that we can do, regardless of what level we are within the organization, is always reach out to our network and try to recruit. Because, for example, as Sonia was saying, like, half of the panel here, we knew each other from before. That means we have a network of people, and now we know more. Now we know Heather, now we know Kenak, now we know Datre. So we're growing our network every time. Every time we know that there is an open position for X or Y, we reach out to someone that we know might be suitable for this job, right? And that someone maybe just happened to be a woman, or maybe just happened to be somebody with a different background or something like that. And so that's how you start diversifying your workspace as well. So for example, one more thing that you could do is you could always remind your peers, hey, you need to be prepared for when the opportunity comes. So for example, in our company, it's a startup, it's like barely 100 employees, I believe. Oh, actually, yeah, we grew. Anyways, they did a manager's tool training or something like that. And so they say, oh, all of the managers are invited to this training. And I, the ones in this panel who know me know that I will be the one coming and asking, can I go? I'm not a manager just yet, but I asked my manager, oh, if you have any spots left, can I join the manager's training? And he said, oh, of course, like, I'll check and make sure if we have. And he said, I didn't know you were interested. And I'm like, maybe not right now, but I know I need to be prepared for things like that. And guess what? Now I get invited to all of these trainings and people are like, oh, are you a manager? And I'm like, well, not yet, but it's just like what I think some of you were mentioning before. You need to go and ask for those things. even if they're not necessarily right there for you because you're not at that level, you just go and grab them. You just go and ask them. The worst thing that can happen is they tell you no. But also, I know my company is hiring. So what did I do? I reach out to my Purdue friends that I knew were graduating, and I say, hey, I got this position. And I try to recruit people from my circle. Of course, I was trying to recruit women, but what I'm trying to say is I know that we need to fill out those spots so that eventually when manager positions open or like growing paths open, we are right there. It's not like we have to go seek them out because we're already in that pipeline. So I think building a pipeline is very important, regardless of whether it is in our company or some other company. Sometimes I go on LinkedIn and I see job openings and I read the descriptions. And if I know that I know somebody with those qualifications, I send them along. Even if they're already working, I go, hey, I think this would be really good for you. Because I know that it's not hard for everybody to want to grow. And if the company that you're currently on is not offering you that growth, you can always diversify, because that's also diversifying yourself. And that will go back to what Heather was saying. That will give you, you have your toes in different buckets type of thing. Like, about software development, about algorithms, about systems. So when you bring all that together, maybe your next opportunity will come out because you had the right training. So I think that's important for us to get more diversity into, leadership positions. We have to be trained for it. So it's like, let's do the actual job and let's train for it so that we can be ready for when those positions would open up.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Bonnie. I'm now moving on to some technical questions from the audience. One question is about MATLAB. Many students studying astrodynamics use MATLAB. Do you think MATLAB still is the best software, or do you recommend other tools like Python?
I think I can start off on that. Since I just transitioned from academia to industry for my internship, that is true that in academia, especially in undergrad, we are pretty MATLAB focused, but on the industry side, it's very Python, JavaScript, now sometimes even Julia based, simply because some of the software packages and the commercial softwares that we use for realistic mission design, they integrate with Python or C++ or something like that. I don't think I've touched MATLAB in the past month or so since I started working in the industry. So.
Oh, thank you.
So I think I've had a different experience. So working at NASA Johnson, I wouldn't say MATLAB is exclusively used in the branch that I work in, but it is heavily used. There's certain software packages that are, written by engineers in MATLAB. So I would say it's definitely still a good skill to have. It's always good to be able to double check, software packages that you may get from companies. You could code up your own things and, use your engineering judgment and see if what you're getting out of those tools is actually what you think is correct. But I think MATLAB is a valuable tool, but having the ability to teach yourself new languages or being able to, being willing to and able to expand, beyond MATLAB is definitely useful. So just like Kanak was saying, Julia and Python and, there's people coding in C++, there's things that are going on in Fortran and, there's a million different languages. I don't think that there's necessarily one in particular that is, the shining star across the astrodynamics industry.
Oh, that's interesting information. Thank you. Moving on to some more technical questions from the audience. Is studying two-body based trajectory optimization technique necessary to have a good qualification for future work, as a higher fidelity models may be needed? repeat the question. Is studying the two-body based trajectory optimization technique necessary to have a good qualification for future work, as higher fidelity models may be needed?
I would say, sort of targeting the last question and this question, depending on the job that you take, you may be asked to do a lot of different things, and you can't possibly study all those things, before you take on a job. And for the software question, in terms of coding languages, sometimes it's really problem dependent, and understanding what's out there and at least knowing how to find information about the different programming languages helps you to decide which one's best for a particular problem. MATLAB can be great for some problems. It has limitations, and so understanding the other software is really important in order to make a good decision about what you're going to do going forward. And I think that carries over to the second question too. Having a diversity of kind of experiences sets you up so that when you see a new problem, which inevitably you're going to, you're ready to take it on because you've handled that before. You've learned new things. And so I think coming into our field with sort of a growth mindset, a learning mindset, is kind of key to survival in a lot of ways, because unless you're taking on a long-term position that's going to be somewhat repetitive, you may be tasked with really different things from, in my own job, every 6 months or so, I could have complete project turnover, and I love it. They're amazing projects, and I'm lucky to be able to kind of weasel my way into the ones that I really think are interesting. But no one thing solves all of those. So so I would say that, that might be necessary depending on the problem that you encounter, but you could certainly learn it too when the time comes. If, if a particular skill set is needed, then being ready to learn that is kind of, I think, the mindset to keep.
Yeah, and I would like to add to what Amanda said, that during my PhD program, I was convinced that I needed to go even higher and higher fidelity models, right? So we concentrate on the three-body problem, and towards the last few years of my PhD, we were even looking at the four-body problem, and we need to go more and more robust, and more and more robust. And then when I joined my job, it's all two-body problem. So why? Because Amanda just said it. It depends on the problem. So what we're doing right now is looking at low Earth orbit. So literally, you can go really, really high fidelity with a Keplerian model, because you can do a Keplerian with perturbations, right? And so what we really care about is orbit determination in what I'm doing right now, which is the collision avoidance. When you're very close to Earth, it doesn't matter if you add any other bodies, because you can get away with adding drag forces, SRP, whatever the case may be, but you don't necessarily have to have, for example, the gravity of the sun or Jupiter or Venus. So, but if you're working on interplanetary trajectories, then you might as well do at least a third body gravitational, perturbation. So again, it goes back to depending on what is it that you end up working on, what project you're working at the time. And it is important that you have the ability to work in either model. So I would say do not concentrate only on the Keplerian model, because you might want to be able to understand beyond that, what happens if I add another acceleration to my model? What does that mean in terms of propagation, optimization, and all of that? And at the same time, be, aware that you might actually end up only doing Kepler, depending on what project you're working on. So I think I just wanted to add that compliment to what Amanda said, because I agree with everything you just said. And it was just funny to me that I'm working Kepler now after so many years of the three-body problem. But it's amazing because we're adding other perturbations and stuff. But yeah, so you never know what project you're going to end up working with and what skills you're going to end up utilizing.
Thank you for that. I think we are coming up on time. Well, I'm going to ask you guys one last question. Sorry. what advice do you have for people just starting their career now? Maybe there are people in the audience that are start looking at the space industry from not having the space industry background, like they're from computer science background or some other type of background, or anybody starting over in their career in this field.
I would say, just super briefly, I think that there is space for everyone in this field. You know, you don't necessarily have to have a background in aerospace engineering to be a contributor. I think, you know, there's a lot of things that you learn if you're focusing on, you know, astrodynamics that will help you if that's your goal. But, you know, like Amanda said, she did an undergrad in physics and has been wildly successful. So I don't think that, you know, you should at all feel limited, you know, by maybe not having the same background as other people. I think you can, there's definitely so many problems that need to be solved, and there's so many different ways of thinking that are taught in other fields that are helpful to astrodynamics and you know, trajectory design and things like that.
Heather, do you have any advice for us?
Yeah, for someone's interested in getting into the field or changing over, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with, you know, what you guys have said so far. And I think, I can't remember who the panel member was that said it, but you've really got to rely on your network, building your network, and use the existing connections that you have. Be willing to be mentored and coached, right? Seek it out. If you're wanting to make a career change, or you're just in an organization and you need to get over here into this other organization, seek out a mentor in that area. You know, it's okay to ask your supervisor, hey, I'm really interested in learning more about this. Can you set me up with, you know, someone that could help me, right? I think most big companies or certainly government agencies have a formal program for mentoring and coaching. I did that when I was ready to kind of move into project management from engineering technical leadership. I sought out mentors at other centers that had really strong project managers and made some really good connections. And I think it's going to be very helpful. Joining a professional society or an organization that is in that area that you're interested in. You know,
I think you went on mute, Heather.
oh, I sure did. I apologize. I was just going to say, just utilizing your network of friends and colleagues around you. I'm in North Alabama, where you can't throw a stick in this town without hitting an engineer. And so, you know, I'm at the softball field talking to parents of some other kid, and I find out that, you know, so-and-so works for this other company, and I need that connection. I'm like, oh, I need, you know, I'm just going to call up this person now that's got information on this particular engine that I'm looking for. And I met him on the softball field. So, you know, just being open to those networks and connections and asking for mentoring, I think is a really good way to help get into the field or change into that organization.
I agree with Heather. I mean, just finding a good mentor is just, I think, super important. If you want to get somewhere here in the aerospace field, you'll get there, but with a good mentor, you'll get there a lot faster. And again, our community is small, so your mentor will know a whole bunch of people that can help you get to where you want to go.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, to work in the space industry, you do not need to be an aerospace engineer exclusively. And I think I did mention a little bit of that when I was talking about the radars, the space radars that we're building. So in our company, it's a space company, but I don't think the people who hold aerospace degrees is like probably like a minority. And it's very interesting because we couldn't do it without the other type of engineers. We couldn't do it without computer scientists. We couldn't do it without software engineers. We couldn't do it without mechanicals. We couldn't do it without electricals. It's all connected, and it's really beautiful when you think about it, because you can have, for example, somebody who did a bachelor's in mechanical and then went and did like grad school aerospace, or even the other way around. You can have somebody who did a bachelor's in aero and then went ahead and did, I don't know, computer science for graduate school. It's all helping you grow, and you're learning from all these different skills that you are eventually going to need if you want to be a leader or a manager. Because if you're going to manage a team of people doing different things, you need to be able to at least understand what each of them is sort of doing. You don't need to be a subject matter expert in each thing that they're working on, but you should at least have some sort of knowledge about it. That means you yourself should be diversified. And the best way to diversify your knowledge at this point, like once you're like in your career working, is with those colleagues of you that are not necessarily the same that you are. Like, for example, the person I'm hanging out with the most with my projects and stuff at work, it's a computer scientist. And it's great because I'm learning tons about programming that I had no idea before. And then because I usually like to ask for more than I should have taken, anyways, I asked for something about conjunctions, like collision probability. And they let me to lead that project. And I had no idea that everything was written in C++. And just a fun fact, I hadn't done C++ since like probably my 5th semester undergrad. This is like a long time ago. But I remember my colleague is a great person because he's a software engineer, and he was like doing C++ for breakfast, dinner, and everything. So guess what? I just called him out, and now he's my partner for this particular project because I have the astro knowledge, but he has the coding knowledge that I needed. And he was working perfect. And now I'm getting refreshed on my C++ skills. So anyways, you don't need to be aerospace. You just need to be interested in space sciences. And once you're interested in space sciences, you're gonna get to aerospace, industry, and you're gonna nail it because you're gonna learn every skill that you don't necessarily have already, and you're gonna start interacting with people that are in different areas, in different projects, and that's what's gonna get the industry moving. So I would say, to go back to the original question, do not worry about not being in aerospace. You can still join the space industry and contribute a lot because we need people from all over.
Thanks, Bonnie. And we're going to wrap up here because we are at time. So I want to thank Daughtry for doing a great job hosting this panel, and for all of the amazing women we had on today. Thank you guys for giving us your time today to talk to everybody here. We really appreciate the insights that you guys had, and I know that I learned a lot. So thank you for joining us. And for everybody who's here on the call, we will be talking with you guys later at some of our later events.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.